freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Thursday edition of Point of View, and we are going to spend some time, as you might imagine, talking about a lot of things. The President spoke last night, so I'll give you just a quick rundown on a couple of points that he made and some questions that obviously surfaced from the way in which he made that presentation. Have a very good piece that is maybe helping us understand sometimes the media reaction to the murder of those Jewish individuals that were in Australia celebrating Hanukkah. I think even though I haven't posted it, I wanted to put up a short piece here of some of the concerns about the investigation there taking place at Brown University, and then we will get into some other topics. Mike Broyles will be with us. He's been in the studio with us before. He is with an individual, well, actually he's a pastor and also has been with Lifeline Global. If you're familiar with the ministry that he's had in the prisons, just unbelievable things that he's been able to do under the leadership of Burl Cain, who's been in the studio with us as well. We'll talk about Malachai Dads. We'll talk about his book, Only God, and of course the Bible that our good friend Gene Getz, Dr. Gene Getz, put together, Men of Character. These are some resources there. And that's just the first hour. Then if you find yourself saying, well, I want some more, well, we'll have that in the second hour, because we have Ray Comfort with us, our good friend at Living Waters. He's got a wonderful book, which I think could be a great evangelistic tool, Idiotic Things People Did in the Bible. And he does not spare any of the major characters in the Bible, so you'll get into that. And then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end talking about a couple of other key issues, some of which have to do with whether or not we should have government IDs, some things about the Federal Reserve, and a couple others. And if we don't get to all of that, we already have put together the material for Friday, which will be, of course, our weekend edition. And we have Jeff Mateer and Dr. Merrill Matthews with us. And, of course, we'll also be talking about, because of Dr. Matthews, some of the health care issues and much, much more. So let's get into it. Last night, the president gave about a 20-minute speech. I was telling somebody that didn't watch it. I said it went 20 minutes. I said, oh, that's unusual. Yeah, it only lasted 20 minutes instead of an hour. But again, I think it, even though it was 20 minutes, could have been 10 minutes too long. I think you want to come in, you make your point, and leave. And again, people's attention span is limited and all the rest. I can make some comments both in style and content. First of all, style. This was, as some people have said, not really a typical presidential speech. It was much more like a CEO of a company saying, here's what we plan to do in the company in January, and now here it is in December, and here's how we fulfilled that. So it was different in that regard from the kind of December speech you would expect from the Oval Office. But nevertheless, Donald Trump is his own person. The other part of that, in terms of style, I just want the president to maybe learn two more words. One of, worst inflation in history. No, one of the worst examples of inflation in history. The best time the border's ever been closed. Well, the border's been closed other times. I mean, just the inflation one alone. I mean, seriously, think of the inflation rate when Jimmy Carter was president in the 1970s. We're talking about double digits, even the inflation after World War II. But the president is what the president is. And I've been around people like that before. I had a friend that oftentimes, every time he introduced me, you would think I was the best person who ever spoke on this topic. And sometimes I would come up afterwards, after he just gave this incredibly glowing and over-the-top introduction, say, I think even though my wife and my mother would appreciate that, I think they'd both roll their eyes and say, I think you're a little bit over the top. And that's just the style of Donald Trump, but I guess we'll never change that. What about some of the things he said? Well, there were some very important things, and of course there's a fair amount of fact-checking going on today because of his hyperbole. But first of all, he talked about the border being secure. That is true. He talked about it from the worst to the best. Again, you might get a little bit upset with the hyperbole, but he says the border was open. Because of this, our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people, many of whom came from prisons and jails and mental institutions. Goes on to talk about drug dealers, gang members, and all the rest. And again, I trust him for some of the facts and figures, even if sometimes some of that gets a little overplayed. Number two, he credited immigration policies with helping improve the U.S. economy. It's not something we've talked about before, but he's not the only one. Vice President J.D. Vance, I remember in one of these interviews when they were talking about housing shortages, he said, well, that's what happens when you bring millions of people in here without actually vetting them and without necessarily planning on them being here. And the person said, now you're shifting the conversation from housing to immigration. He says, no, the two are related. If indeed you bring in millions of individuals, and then the only way you can house them is to actually have the government put them in hotels and pay for their rent and their housing and everything, okay, I think even if that's maybe overextension, there's some truth to that. And okay, I'll give him that one. Announces the use of tariff revenue for military bonuses. I'll save some of that for tomorrow, because if you have listened to this program, you know that Dr. Merrill Matthews, even though Donald Trump last night said tariff is his favorite word, I'd have to say that Dr. Merrill Matthews will say probably his least favorite word is tariff, so we'll get into that as well. But the argument being that they're going to take some of the money that came from tariff revenue and provide bonuses for the military, all about supporting the military. Also concerned about a $38 trillion national debt. A couple more, and again, some of these we'll talk about tomorrow, because he talked about new initiatives to lower health care costs. Now, if you've been listening to the program any length of time, we've talked about allowing associations to actually put together health care plans. That makes a great deal of sense. Being able to buy health care plans across state lines, that makes a great deal of sense. Expanding the use of medical savings accounts. We'll get into that for some detail. And even last Friday, we had Dr. Merrill Matthews talk about Trump RX, the idea of coming up with a way in which you could actually purchase these pharmaceuticals directly, eliminate the middleman. I think those are all things we will spend some time talking about tomorrow. And then the last one, which isn't so much about policy, but it's about culture, and that was the case, said that he has broken the grip of the sinister woke radicals in our schools. Okay, that's overplay, but what he's getting at is that certainly under the Biden administration, you had, as he said, men playing in women's sports, transgender for everybody. He even alleged that radical liberals were indoctrinating your children with hate for America. A little bit of overplay, but nevertheless, we have talked about the so-called transgender agenda. We talked about DEI and some of that. And so you could watch 20 minutes of the president's message. I'm sure it's available in many locales and in lots of different venues if you would like to watch it. But that's my brief, very brief 5-point summary of some of the things he said with some of our reaction, and some of which we will get into tomorrow, because this issue of a debate about health care, as we mentioned yesterday, is going to be an up or down vote, both on the extending the enhanced subsidies as well as on the so-called Republican plan. So we'll certainly give you an update on how that is going, how that vote might take place, and what the value of one or other plans might be. That will be something we'll postpone to tomorrow. Let's come back and get into a couple other issues. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The electoral buzzword these days is affordability. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, politicians need to take seriously the concerns of average Americans who are having a difficult time economically. But the other side to affordability is affluence. In a recent commentary, Kelsey Piper reminds us that medieval kings would envy you. We live in a world of affluence that people in other centuries could not even imagine. She walks you through her house and counts 27 varieties of tea in a cupboard stuffed to the brim. She looks at her bookshelf and reflects on the fact that when the Library of Congress was founded, it had 740 books. She has more. She walks by glass windows, which were a luxury adornment for the homes of the ultra-wealthy since the time of Rome, though that's underselling modern windows. They weren't transparent back then. She also talks about a refrigerator and flush toilets. When she talks about her children, the comparison with the English royal line is stark. King James I and his wife had 7 children and buried 5. His son Charles and his wife had 9 children and buried 5. His son James had 8 children by his first wife and buried 6, then had 7 children by his second wife and buried 5, not including several miscarriages and stillbirths. She concludes, we are rich beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. We casually discard things for which they would have worked all their lives. This is a message we need to tell ourselves frequently. We live in a world of affluence and need to stop from time to time to remind ourselves of the blessings we enjoy every day. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view on chemical abortion, go to viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. Viewpoints.info/chemical abortion. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you go to the website, you will notice that my commentary today is about affordability and affluence. And in some respects, people have said that the most recent trip that Donald Trump was taking around the United States was the affordability tour. And even last night, some people thought that it might be seen as an answer to the issue of affordability. And if that's the case, he did put some facts and figures on the table, but it's going to take more than a 20-minute speech by the president. And of course, we'll have midterms. And we will be talking about that tomorrow on Point of View. That's one of the other articles, some of the various issues associated with the midterm elections and how that's going to affect even policy, certainly front and center. Just a few minutes, we'll be talking with our good friend Mike Broyles, and this is Malachai Dads Prison Ministry. And first of all, today we do want to salute all of you that are involved in some aspect of prison ministry. Tomorrow you'll see we're saluting those of you that have served in the military or serve to reach out to people in the military. So each day we have some different themes. And of course, the last couple of days we've talked about some of the issues of suffering and loneliness and a variety of others. So lots of issues we certainly want to talk about as we're just a week away from Christmas. And next week, of course, is Christmas week. We'll be covering all sorts of topics in the news. One of which I felt needed to be focused on at least one more time, and that is how the press has covered and reacted to the killing of Jews there on the beach in Australia. And Noah Rothman came up with a line that I've used before, but I haven't said it in a while. It's worth mentioning. And that is, he said, when the subject of a story makes Democrats look bad, the story is never the story. Rather, the story becomes the reaction to the story, preferably reactions that are immature or gratuitous. In this way, readers are dissuaded from associating themselves with anything that the Democratic Party has said or done. And you've heard this before because we've talked about this as well. And for example, if there is a real problem, you will read, for example, that Republicans pounce on the issue, pounce on whatever issue it might be. Not as Republicans point to, Republicans note, but the point he's made is that oftentimes in the media, and if you want to have discernment, sometimes the story is not the story. The story very quickly in the media becomes the reaction to the story. So with that as a background, he says we see this now with the way in which some of the reactions to this terrible killing of these Jewish individuals is, because he says we now have a new corollary to that, and one that maybe is best illustrated by one that he posts. Kenneth Roth, don't even know who he is, says, basically, it's obscene how the right has seized on the Bondi Beach massacre, that's where it took place there in Australia, to advance an Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian agenda, discussing to see Israel's politicians almost gleeful at the opportunity to distract from their genocidal onslaught in Gaza. Don't know who this person is, but please calm down a little bit. But here's the point. Yes, we should, for very good reasons, bring attention to what has happened in Australia. Sometimes people want to overplay that. This was a father and a son, but there were certainly many other individuals in Australia that would have done the same thing or supported it. And the idea here is in the article to basically suggest that drawing America's and the world's attention away from the killing is more important because it's taking us from not addressing what is happening in Israel right now. And I thought it was kind of interesting because even though they talk about we don't really yet know the motives of the killers, the author of this particular article that Kenneth Ross is pointing to says we don't know. It does seem kind of intriguing that, and I'm giving you a direct quote, authorities have since linked the two men to ISIS. That might be a tip-off right there, and I think you could probably draw a few other associations from that as well. And so, if nothing else, you are then told that it's just obscene how quickly the right has ceased on the horror to advance its Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian idea. And so you just can see that this is sort of almost trying to take your attention away from the reality. Sometimes people rush in too quickly when there's a shooting, whether it's a shooting in the United States by whether a person's black or white, liberal or conservative, and all sorts of people begin to force their agenda onto that particular issue. But this one is pretty clear because, interestingly enough, the author points out that, yes, one of the victims is a rabbi and had supported Israel, but then in passing mentions that there was no indication that the rabbi was targeted because of his view. And what Noah Rothman points out is that's true. He wasn't targeted for his views. He was targeted because he was a visibly Jewish man attending a Hanukkah celebration. And a cautious reader cannot help but conclude from the inclusion of the statement that the rabbi supported Israel to maybe see that maybe the author didn't rule out the notion that maybe he got what was coming to him. And so he says the message is clear. If you want to be regarded as a serious person in the supposed pro-Palestinian community, you cannot even show much sympathy for people that are Jewish that have been killed. They're one of many victims here. They are victims, and the story is not the story. It is the reaction to the story. And I think it is really important to recognize that if you want to exercise some discernment, pay attention to that, this distraction. We can talk about logic, about red herrings and changing the discussion and all the rest. But I think you can figure out very quickly that in some respects, as you start reading some of these pieces that are coming out now after this onslaught against Jewish individuals on the beach in Australia, the implication is, well, after all, they have maybe some issues that we need to address, and we probably don't need to be that sympathetic to what has been taking place. So I want you to see that. It's our first article, and it's just a reminder again that those of us that are Christians, those of us wanting to use reasonable logic, need to understand that sometimes the story is not the story. The story is the reaction to the story. Just before I take a break, though, if you haven't been paying attention, one of the other issues that has been of concern is the shooting of the students in Brown University. And what has become almost a concern on the part of people both on the left and the right is what seems to be almost this haphazard investigation in the murder of these two Brown students. And multiple sources now are saying, from different points of view, that Brown University even conducted mass deletions of their website, purging the comments of students and others celebrating the murder of one of these pro-Israel Christian students, Ella Cook. Now, later on, I might just point out the president of Brown University claims she's unaware of any materials being deleted, so we'll have that as it is. But there seems to me some real concerns as to whether or not there is maybe a connection to Jewish people. And one of the reasons is there's been a lot of speculation swirling around one Brown University student, Mustafa Karbouche. And now he is an individual born in Lebanon. He's a pro-Palestinian radical. He wrote an essay in which he says, our refusal to be complacent in the heart of the empire is a bare minimum of love and care we can show our people in Gaza. Palestine is becoming a question of how we, the radical left, want to fundamentally rearrange our world. By refusing to be complacent, he means pro-Hamas rioting. And there are some real concerns about whether or not some of the shooting that was taking place at Brown University was actually done because, again, of a Jewish connection. We don't know. But for sure, there are a lot of people that are saying either this is gross incompetence or there is some kind of cover-up. And right now, you even have the Providence, Rhode Island police officials saying looking for a second person seen in the video in the same vicinity. And so there are just a lot of issues that caused many people to wonder what's going on with this investigation at Brown University. This piece I'm quoting from, you can find in Gary Bauer's piece. We'll have Gary Bauer on next week. And, of course, if you watched Fox News last night, there were a couple of investigation pieces. And the more you watch, the more you say, either this is a lot of incompetence or maybe there's a cover-up there. We'll find out more as time goes on, but let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we want to highlight prison ministry, and in particular, the Malachai Dads prison ministry, one that is done through Lifeline Global Ministries. And we'll be talking with Executive Director and individual who's been in studio with us, also joins us by phone now. Mike Broyles is a family pastor, has been a family pastor for more than 50 years, and has been the individual that had the idea of developing Lifeline Global Ministries. That goes back to 2003 in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. That is the Angola State Prison under the leadership of Mr. Burl Cain. Both of them have been in studio with us as well. And the goal and vision of Lifeline Global is to restore and equip incarcerated men and women to be godly parents so that this generational cycle of incarceration can be broken. We will be talking primarily about Malachai Dads, but let me also mention that there's course, Hannah's Gift, one for men, one for women. This is a curriculum that is now, I believe, in about 40 states, 20 countries around the world. And Mike, first of all, welcome back to Point of View.
Thank you so much, Kerby. It's great being with you again.
Let me just, for those of you watching online, hold up quite a bit, and you will see if you happen to be watching all sorts of books. First of all, we have The Heart of the Father. This is the curriculum, Malachai Dads, Lifeline Global Ministries, and we've talked about it before, but we'll talk about it again. Then we have the book by Mike Broyles, forward by Burl Cain, Only God, which I'll hold up there as well. And if that's not enough, our good friend Gene Getz the other day wanted to make sure I had a copy of Men of Character Bible. I think I've got actually more than one of those, but let me hold that up as well. And it's got my name on it, and this is in a holder that would be helpful. So any of you watching online can see that there are resources all over the place here that in some respects remind us of what has been developed. But Mike, take us back to the beginning, because I think it's important, and you talk about that, of course, in your book and in some of the other resources, to have this vision that if we're really going to try to break this generational cycle of children of people in prison ending up in prison, you felt that one of those very significant things was to develop a Christ-honoring curriculum. And for the men, it's Malachai Dads.
Yes, sir. Yes, the sad statistic, Kerby, and those listening, is that inmates' children 70% of the time follow their dad or mom into prison. So we're attempting through Lifeline Global, Malachai Dads, and Hannah's Gift to break that generational cycle, thus introduce men and women while incarcerated to come to faith in Christ. And then our curriculum teaches them how to be godly dads and godly mothers and begin to restore their relationship to their children, and thus, God willing, to break that generational cycle.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because lesson 1 is creation, number 2, sin, 3, salvation, 4 and 5, Christian living, 6 and 7, marriage, part 1 and 2, and then a whole section 1, 2, 3 on fathering and inmate challenge in the heart. So it's a mixture of theological information that they need to have, but a significant amount, Mike, is just practical living, marriage, and fathering, because if they came from a broken home, if they came from an institution where maybe their father or mother or both were institutionalized, you're in a sense teaching them some things that I would suspect many of our listeners would already have known because they grew up in a structured family home and they probably went to church, and yet you're having to provide that so that they can begin to be more effective when they eventually are released.
Yeah, we're about helping them begin to reestablish their family while they're incarcerated, and thus 95% of all inmates are going home someplace. And so we want to prepare them with a biblical, Christ-honoring solutions and assistance to help them. I kind of look at it this way, Kerby, of what we try to do is if you look at a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 the ideal father or mother, a lot of our fathers and mothers that are incarcerated have come from abused or abandoned families. And so the scale of 1 to 10, a lot of our folks on the inside in prison are at the lower end of that scale, and thus we're trying to teach them a biblical framework of what it means to be a man or a woman, a godly father, a godly mother, and raise that up. And so by the time they go home, God willing, that they've established their relationship with their kids on the phone and various ways of communicating, and then they can re-enter that home, hopefully with some real traction of being a real godly father and a godly mother.
Let me just mention, first of all, we have a link to lifelineglobal.org. You can type that in, or you can just simply follow the link there, and you will see all the things they're involved with in terms of family restoration, community restoration, generational restoration. There's a video or two to watch, all sorts of resources that you can find, and if you're involved in prison ministry, I would highly recommend that. We do have, of course, one link to even show you what the Malachai Dads Heart of a Father paperback looks like. And I thought for just a minute, Mike, we might have you talk about that, because I'll just pick one lesson. First of all, it starts with facilitator notes. You have some key topics, some things for what the large group can do, what the small group can do. Then you have the section for the individuals, and you have a large group session. You have the review of the previous one, some objectives, some discussion, and some things of that nature. But then as you go through that, there's a series of questions that they can begin to interact with. There's a way in which they can summarize some of that. There are memory verses, and then there's some homework. So in some respects, the way this is put together, you could put this in the hand of a chaplain or even just a layperson who says, I would like to have a ministry inside our local prison. And basically, it's plug and play, ready to go, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And easy to follow. The core of what we're teaching in our curriculum is how to be a godly man or a godly woman and a godly father and godly mother. And thus, we've written the curriculum to be usable for lay people and chaplains. And a lot of it's based upon questions in the curriculum, and then Scripture is built right into the curriculum, and they can easily participate with that, interact. We believe in the preaching and the teaching of the Word of God, but Malachai Dads and Hannah's Gift is really small group discipleship oriented and interaction with the men and women in the smaller groups of 6, 8, or 10 people participating. So we have chaplains and volunteers who participate and lead these groups, and that's a great delight to us to see that done.
And again, I might just mention as we're going to a break that we would encourage you during the break to go to lifelineglobal.org. You'll see that there's a leader training guide. There's even online video curriculum. So if you find yourself saying, well, what do I say next? How do I do this? First of all, it's just very easy to pull together, and it's exactly what I think we need to do. But when we come back, I do want to talk a little bit about your book, which came out last year, Only God, Transforming One Inmate and Family at a Time, because you take us through a variety of different stories that I think would be of encouragement. This might be a book that you would want to read individually as an encouragement, but it might be one where you could share some of the stories out of that if your church is thinking about being involved in some kind of prison ministry, wondering, well, what can I do with that? And especially what I think when I want to come back from the break, Mike, is talk about, you've got some sections here, what I've learned from prison leaders, which I think would be very helpful, and even this idea of a new model for prisons, because it does seem to me that if you keep doing what you've been doing and it's not working, maybe it's time to do something else. And I thought we'd also, just for a minute, also point out how the Men of Character Bible, which has this opportunity for people to use QR codes to really begin to help individuals that are going through this curriculum learn how to read God's Word and study God's Word and do a much better job of beginning to apply God's Word to their lives. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mike Broyles. If you'd like to know a little bit more, we, of course, have information about him on the website, or you can simply go to lifelineglobal.org. We'll continue our conversation with him right after this.
You're listening to Point of View. your listener-supported source for truth.
Mike Broyles with us for a few more minutes. Again, if you would like to know more about lifelineglobal.org, I would encourage you to go to our website or go directly there and find out a little bit more. Of course, we talk about Malachai Dads for the men, Hannah's Gift for the women. But I also thought, Mike, for just a few minutes, we'd talk about your book, Only God, Transforming One Inmate and Family at a Time. First of all, just incredible stories in the first part of the book. But you also talk about the future of prison ministry and the whole issue of how churches can get involved and maybe even some things you've learned. And I thought it'd be worthwhile for you to just pass some of that on, because if a church is thinking we do have an opportunity for prison ministry, but we don't really know how to get started, or we started one but we couldn't maintain it, what kind of advice might you give to them?
Yes, well, we would love to come alongside and assist local churches, pastors, and key lay people, both men and women, to help you start your prison ministries. That's really what we do. And so we have, as you mentioned earlier in the first segment, we have some materials called Equipped Leaders that's especially written for volunteers that go into prisons and jails to get them started. With everything, Kerby, with the internet and websites and Zoom, we do about an hour training or orientation and training to help you with your key people. Before you go in, we go over the curriculum. We go about some policies that you need to be alert to and some of our guidelines. And so we do a Zoom training for approximately an hour, so we could connect you up, and then you, the local church people, normally have a connection to that jail or prison. You know, a chaplain, you know, a leader in that prison, and you can work through the system. And then we act as consultants. We get you the materials, the things you need, the videos that we have. We get you the materials, and then you walk through with the sheriff's departments or the state prisons, wherever you're close to, and we will coach you along, especially as you begin that journey with lay people. So we would love to assist local churches who have a heart for the broken, a heart for those who have taken steps that they need correction. But we want to bring Christ, and we want to bring healing and restoration to the family, even while they're in prison.
Let's begin talk about what happened there in Angola, the Louisiana State Penitentiary. You had Burl Cain there. We've had him in studio with us before. Of course, he wrote the foreword to your book. But you do point out that many of the wardens there in Angola lasted only a few years because it was a violent, hopeless place. Warden Cain is a Christian, and because of you, because of him, and because of some of the changes, this was something that not only was he successful as a warden, he's gone on to bigger and better things as well. And it does seem to me that we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. We can, in some respects, learn from those of you that made the wheel work.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Kerby. Yes, Mr. Cain was very key in helping us get started here at Angola Prison in Louisiana. And one of the unique things that's happening currently at Angola, and I mean within the last 3 or 4 months, is that the current warden, Warden Benoit, who's a Christian man also at Angola, he has allowed Malachai Dads to go into death row. And so we have 12 men who are studying the Bible through Malachai Dads.
Wow.
And I asked the Warden Benoit, could I come in and be a fly on the wall and listen to a lesson? So I got to go in there in November, just a few weeks ago, and I listened to these guys. I shared the gospel. I didn't know what I was going to get into, Kerby, but what I found with these 12 men in Angola State Prison and death row was men who loved Christ, who quoted the Bible, who respected one another, and had such peace and joy and contentment. And only, as I say in my book, only God can pull that off, even on death row.
Just before I go, I wanted to get to at least one other issue on, and that is I mentioned at the outset here that I have this Men of Character Bible, and that has been so instrumental. It's the work of Dr. Gene Getz, and of course it's got, I think, 60 in-depth studies of men of character from the Bible, about nearly 50 different character profiles, and then, of course, these QR codes where they can use their phone or whatever they might have to actually see some of the teaching by Dr. Getz, even some of the testimonies from some of the men. And so that is a resource I think people should consider as well, don't you think?
Oh, it's a beautiful resource. Dr. Getz, for the last 10 years, has allowed us to, through his organization, to give away studies in the Men of Character Bibles. And so we have 4 Malachai Dads studies and 3 for the women. And those who finish all of those books, Gene graciously gives us these Men of Character Bibles that we give away to the people who have finished the materials. And so even on death row, we did it a little bit different on death row, Kerby. So Gene gave us the Bibles, the Men of Character Bibles, and so as I went in November, we got to give each of the men on death row one of those study Bibles. It was like I was giving them $1,000 each.
Wow.
It was beautiful because I don't think they've ever seen a study Bible. They had Bibles, but they didn't have
nothing like this.
Help.
That's right. It's just amazing. And I just, again, I'll hold up the container that came in for those of you watching, and I'll now hold up the Bible because that's a resource as well. And we just wanted you to know about all of that. But, Mike, we're just about out of time, and I thought, again, what I want to do is point people to the website. If there's an individual that has some questions, you are quite willing to answer some of those questions. You can click on some of the buttons that they have there, which allows you to contact individuals there. There's the curriculum material. There's just all sorts of ways you can already interact. And so if you have been thinking about in your church doing a prison ministry or a jail ministry, maybe you've done one before, it hasn't worked very well, and you're looking for something that would revitalize it, let me encourage you to contact Mike and the great work that they are doing there at Lifeline Global. And I just think that you will benefit tremendously from some of the resources that they are providing. And again, I would commend to you the Malachai Dads, and also I'll hold up your book, Only God, because again, transforming one inmate and family at a time. Mike, it was great to have you in studio with us in the past, and I appreciate you joining us today by phone.
Thank you so much. We'd love to assist anybody or church to get you started. Give us a call.
Please give them a call or just send them an email. We have all that information at our website at pointofview.net. One more way we can celebrate those of you that are involved in prison ministry. If you wonder, well, how do I share the gospel? Well, that's Ray Comfort. He's on with us next. We'll be right back.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give the point of view today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking about evangelism and how to share the gospel with others and apologetics. I think you will really appreciate that, because we bring back to the microphone Ray Comfort, founder and CEO of Living Waters, best-selling author of over 100 different books. We're going to be talking about one that I think will be very useful to you in sharing with your non-Christian friends, neighbors, coworkers, maybe family members. Idiotic Things People Did in the Bible. He is, of course, also the executive producer of 180 Evolution versus God, of course, the TV program Way of the Master. And Ray Comfort, always great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Kerby. Great to be here.
I love your books, and I've used them in various ways. And, of course, you are best known for providing the moral argument. And anytime I have somebody saying, well, I'm a good person, and I start beginning to share that, I can hear Ray Comfort speaking in the back of my mind. But you've also used some of these books over the years in a way to get people's attention. And just to give people a feel for the table of contents, you have a Lot's wife, a salted example, Samson, a strong man with a weak mind, Solomon, the wisest man but the dumbest husband, all the way into the foolish rich man, a presumptuous planner, and all sorts of examples, and 33 different chapters, all which take on a particular character in the Bible, and then a series of questions for reflection. So, first of all, talk about how we can use that, because I think all of us would enjoy reading through it, but I do know some people that might say, yeah, I believe that. A bunch of idiotic people in the Bible. Okay, well, why don't you read a few of those? There's a real opportunity to use this in an evangelistic way, isn't there?
Absolutely. That's why it was written mainly. I'm the idiotic author. I don't know if you've got a copy of the book.
I got it right in front of me. Yeah.
Okay. You like the cover?
Oh, I do. I'll hold this up for the people watching online. It's sort of a great Mona Lisa, scary-looking face. I mean, but I do love the cover. And by the way, I would commend the book to you. It's just fascinating reading. And I think for those of you that are Bible teachers, you can probably put it to good use. But go on. I think it's important for people to know how people can use this book.
Yeah, if you know, it's third page in, I've dedicated it to my good friend Ken Ham.
Yes.
I don't know if you read that, but it says to my good friend Ken Ham, whose life inspired the title of this book. But it's full of idiotic things, and it's an easy thing to give to unsaved people. And when I said I'm an idiotic author, I do idiotic things every day. I'm not pointing the finger at these people in the Bible. Just the other day, a pastor sent me a text and it said, how you doing? And I immediately wrote back and said, getting old and ugly. Other than that, things are great. And then I reread his text, and it said, how are you and your wife doing? And so...
Didn't work so well.
So, yeah, every day I confirm that I should be the author of this book, but it's packed full of idiotic things people have done. You read a little bit of them. Like some people ask, if you ask, what are you going to do when you get to heaven? Some people say, well, I'm going to fall at the feet of Jesus, or I want to talk to David, or something like that. What I want to do is smack Adam in the mouth, because every bit of suffering that we've got in this life, earthquakes, floods, diseases, pain, disease, like I said, and dentists, everything like that causes suffering, it's because of Adam's sin, and it's been passed on to us. So I'm not exactly excited with that, what happened in Genesis. But, when you read these men of God that did dumb things, they're written for our admonition, so we don't walk in their footsteps. And
yes.
Like I said, the great thing, you can give this to an unsaved person, even to an atheist. I sent one to Penn Jillette. I'm friends with Penn Jillette, and I said, you might enjoy this. And I'm sure he will enjoy it, because he thinks Christians are idiots and thinks the Bible's full of idiotic things. And this is going to confirm it. But they're written so that we don't do what Solomon did. We look at David and say, look at him staring at his neighbor. No, don't even look. If you covet your neighbor's wife, it's going to create sin in your heart. If you're like Cain and you let bitterness get in your heart and jealousy, and the anger is going to spill over to murder. And the Bible says he that hates his brother is a murderer. And we see that taking place in the life of Cain. Same with Judas. Judas started by coveting, loving money. And he was the collection of the bag collector, or the treasurer for the disciples. And that's where it all started. And that's why he sold Jesus 30 pieces of silver, and we don't want to follow in his steps and love money more than we love God. So that's why it's written. It's not written to show that the Bible's full of idiotic things. It's just people are just like you and I, men of light passions, as the Bible says, and women of light passions. They made mistakes, and we don't want to follow in their steps.
Lots of lessons that we can learn, hopefully vicariously rather than experientially. Let me talk about for just a minute, because you did dedicate it to Ken Ham, and that, I think, is something that we might want to focus on for just a minute, because Ken Ham has made it very clear, and you and I and Ken have been at various events together, and he gets very upset when people refer to these as Bible stories, because stories sound like they might not be true. These are historical figures, and in some respects, like you said, he helped inspire the title of the book because of some of the things he has done over the years in his ministry, and of course the various things you've done in your ministry.
Yeah, well, I just got to say, we've got a special relationship. Ken's Australian. Australians talk a little bit like this, and through the nose. And I'm New Zealander. We're a little bit more cultured. And there's this battle, there's this little battle between us. It's been going on for, I think, 6 years. We've been texting each other, and Ken doesn't know how to show affection because he's Australian, from the outback sort of thing. And the best you can get from an Australian is, I really like you, even if you are an idiot. They've got to add an insult along with a compliment, because of very proud, thick-skinned people. And so for the last 6 years, every day, I've been getting multiple insults from Ken Ham. I'm not kidding. My height, how ugly I am, how dumb I am, and it's his way of showing affection. We just talked like 5 or 10 minutes ago. And so that's why I dedicated the book to him with tongue-in-cheek, because he's an idiot. And I love him. And I'll tell you what he does. He'll get a crowd of people. He'll get a crowd of people that are in the ark, and he'll put them on FaceTime, swing the camera to them, and the whole lot of them will say together, "We've never heard of Ray Comfort." He's trained them to say that. And so I get him back by saying something like this: "Turn the camera on you, Ken." And he says, "Okay." And then I say, "Ken, I love you." And he doesn't know how to handle that. So that's the way I get back at him. But he's a great guy. He is. Even if he is an idiot.
Even if he's an idiot. I might mention, too, the end of the book, ending this idiotic book on a positive note, and you do have some positive aspects of that as well. We need to take a break. We'd come back for a few more minutes. I thought we'd talk about the book just briefly, just a couple of vignettes from that. And then I do want to point people, even during the break, to go to livingwaters.com. There are just so many great videos. And over the years, even though I've only occasionally seen you at conferences where we've been speaking together, I feel like I know your life because you carry these cameras around, and I get to watch the interviews you do with individuals, and that in some respects is one of the things I want to point people to, especially during the Christmas holidays. I might have a little more free time. This would be a great opportunity for you to watch some of the videos that are available to learn a little bit more about how to share your faith. And as we just talked about last hour, one aspect of that, of course, is the prison ministry we focused on. But whether it's out on the streets, out on the beach like Ray Comfort does, or talking to people over the Christmas table, just again want you to know how to share the faith and share the gospel effectively. So we'll come back and talk about that with our good friend Ray Comfort right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The electoral buzzword these days is affordability. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, politicians need to take seriously the concerns of average Americans who are having a difficult time economically. But the other side to affordability is affluence. In a recent commentary, Kelsey Piper reminds us that medieval kings would envy you. We live in a world of affluence that people in other centuries could not even imagine. She walks you through her house and counts 27 varieties of tea in a cupboard stuffed to the brim. She looks at a bookshelf and reflects on the fact that when the Library of Congress was founded, it had 740 books. She has more. She walks by glass windows, which were a luxury adornment for the homes of the ultra-wealthy since the time of Rome, though that's underselling modern windows. They weren't transparent back then. She also talks about a refrigerator and flush toilets. When she talks about her children, the comparison with the English royal line is stark. King James I and his wife had 7 children and buried 5. His son Charles and his wife had 9 children and buried 5. His son James had 8 children by his first wife and buried 6, then had 7 children by his second wife and buried 5, not including several miscarriages and stillbirths. She concludes, we are rich beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. We casually discard things for which they would have worked all their lives. This is a message we need to tell ourselves frequently. We live in a world of affluence and need to stop from time to time to remind ourselves of the blessings we enjoy every day. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view on chemical abortion, go to viewpoints.info/chemical-abortion. Viewpoints.info/chemical-abortion.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Rick Comfort with us, and I was checking my phone just a minute ago to see if I got a text from Ken Ham, which would probably said something like, why are you having this guy on the radio today? But haven't received that quite yet, but we'll see where that goes. And again, Ray Comfort with us as we talk about, of course, the book Idiotic Things People Did in the Bible. And I went also to livingwaters.com, which I encourage you to do at the break. And thousands of free videos, millions of views, 333,206,468, give or take a few, total views. So these videos have had a great impact. But before we talk about those, talk about how to use the book, because each one of the chapters, what they did, why it was idiotic, here's the scoop, and then some questions for reflection at the end, sometimes some Bible verses you could memorize. And it was just occurred to me as well, Ray, that if you are dealing with children or grandchildren that are maybe dealing with some issue, maybe they're impulsive, maybe they are lying, maybe they are talking back, you can probably find an example here of why what they are doing is idiotic and why they need to change their behavior. So this would also be a possible parenting book, and I hadn't really thought about that until a few minutes ago.
I hadn't either, and I think that's wonderful. To read the mistakes of men and women of God from the scriptures would be great for kids, and to ask what they think they did wrong. And my whole heart is overwhelmed with the reality of hell. I'm heartbroken daily, and the words of Jesus haunt me. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it's better to enter hell without a hand than go to hell with both hell with both your hands. And it haunts me and drives me to reach out to the lost. And that's the main reason for this book, to give to ungodly people, because it has the gospel in it. and very, very clearly on almost every page. Someone sent me a video this morning, or yesterday, sorry, and it was a young YouTuber. Well, not young, he's about in his 30s, and he just got cancer. He's not a Christian. And he was looking at the camera and just saying, I am so scared. It was raw and honest. And they said, please contact this guy. Please contact. So I sent him a video where I said to this young couple, a really sweet couple in mid-20s, one was an atheist. They had no desire for the things of God. And I gave them a little scenario. I said, you wake up in the morning, there's a little pain on your neck, and it just feels weird and very painful. So go to the doctor. He goes, and he checks. He comes back. He said, I thought so. It's lymph node cancer. You've got 2 weeks to live. I'm real sorry about this. And you go home and you're interested in sex or music or partying. All you're thinking about is in 2 weeks, I'm going to be put in a box and buried in the ground. And you've got terror in your heart. I said, because you have ignored God, you have no way of fighting this fear. And I said, can you identify with that scenario? And they said, oh, yes. And it's good to speak to people's will to live or their fear of death. And I told them that, and this is a genuine statistic, 600,000 Americans will die, not just but will die of cancer in the next 12 months. So as Christians, we know that Jesus Christ has abolished death, past tense, and Jesus can not only release you from the power of the grave, but from the fear of death itself. In the same way that if you've got faith in a parachute when you jump, you'll have no fear. If you've got no faith, then you're going to be tormented by fear. And so when the Bible says to put on the Lord Jesus Christ, it means to trust in him like you trust a parachute, so that when you pass through death, you won't be fearful. And so we've got good news beyond this world's dreams. Right at this moment, there are literally millions, not exaggerating, but people in torture chambers that we call gyms, lifting weights that are far too heavy for them and drinking green slime. And I think it's good to look after your body, but they're doing it just to extend their life a little bit more. We've found everlasting life in Christ. So we've got to say with the disciples, we cannot but speak that which we've seen and heard. And if you can't get up on a soapbox and preach the gospel in a university, if you can't witness to your neighbor, you can give them a Christian book which has the light of the gospel in it. And this is what this book can do. It can have a curiosity factor to draw them in, read the weaknesses of men of God and women of God, and realize that the dumbest thing you can do, the most idiotic thing you can do, is die in your sins without a Savior. And we don't want that to happen even to our worst enemy.
That's right. And again, if you go to those views, the first one is, he's terrified of dying, so I sent him this. And again, the book is entitled Idiotic Things People Did in the Bible, and it's funny, and it's honest, it's eye-opening, but ultimately what's at stake is a person's eternal destiny. And so don't walk by people that you know and not take the opportunity to speak to them, or as Ray said, even if you can't put together a compelling gospel message, certainly hand them this book or other resources that you have there. And let's, if we can, for just a minute before I let you go, talk about that, because you've got so many resources. And I remember when you just first came over here from New Zealand and you were getting going, I saw some of the little small tracks, but there is so much now, so many good resources. And if they just click on that button that says store, they're going to find all sorts of ways in which they can share a book, a track, or some resource with their friends, their neighbors, co-workers, family members. And Ray, that's really the vision that you have there at Living Waters, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're a nonprofit, and if you get our newsletter, you'll know when in the next couple of months we're releasing a couple of million football, World Cup soccer,
yes,
$1 million bills free of charge. And we hope to be able to pay the shipping as well as make these tracks free. They're $1 million bills with a gold cup on the front. They're really beautiful. And so we've got to take advantage of things like this, because there's going to be literally millions of people coming to America to watch all these games around the country and in Canada and in Mexico. And to give them something like this is a collectible for them. They're going to say, oh, thank you for this. It's a memorabilia, so they're going to be free of charge. And so just sign up for our newsletter at livingwaters.com so we can tell you when they come out.
Let me just mention that because, again, that's a great opportunity with the World Cup. I might also notice that you have your autobiography coming out in the spring, Compelled, and that's an incredible story of how you became a Christian, how you decided to come here, and how you've been doing beach and street evangelism for decades, right?
Yes, when I came over here, I didn't know what to do. I knew God wanted me over here. It was just, I think, 13 different things confirmed to us to accept the invite to come to California. But for the first 3 years, things were very quiet. So I went to MacArthur Park, not realizing that it was the most murderous portion of Los Angeles, and I had to preach with my back to a tree so I wouldn't get stabbed. I don't think I'd go there again. I was very naive when I first came over here. I was like Ken Ham. And but it's very, very exciting what happened at MacArthur Park, and so that's part of the book. It's the beginning of the book.
Well, again, let me just encourage people to go to your store. You even, of course, have the $1 Million Gospel of John, but you're going to have those $1 million given out there. And it's an organization worth supporting. And as we come to year end, I hope that you'll think about going to livingwaters.com. You can click on the various buttons there for speaker, podcast, the school, all the videos, and the store as well. Ray Comfort, thank you so very much for being with us. And as always, Merry Christmas.
Well, same to you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
We are going to encourage you to go and find some of the resources there, great ministries that we talk about so often, and for him to have dedicated this to Ken Ham. I love that. Ken Ham, by the way, said, "I'm not surprised my friend Ray Comfort wrote a book on idiotic things in the Bible. I think only he would even think of such a book, let alone write one. I can't wait for others to read this book." So even though there's a lot of back and forth between the Australian and the New Zealander, nevertheless, an Aussie and a Kiwi are certainly good friends, but you wouldn't know it by some of the things they say about each other. But nevertheless, idiotic things people find in the Bible. And again, this is a great resource, and I hope that you'll take advantage of it as well. Let's, just before we take a break, mention that as we are coming to year end, I hope that you will consider what you might do, not only to support this ministry, but other worthwhile ministries. We, of course, feature many of them on the program, but consider, of course, the fact that you should support your local church, and I would hope that you are doing that already. But I also believe that your tithes and offerings can go other places to ministries, which we talked about with Mike Broyles in terms of reaching out to those in prison. Ray Comfort reaching out just to the lost, and certainly I hope that you will consider reaching out to the radio station that carries this program. But we also are encouraging you as we come to year end, and we're really gearing up for 2026, which will be the 250th anniversary of America. We think that that's very important, and so you will see the banner that we've posted on the website that says Restoring America's Godly Heritage, and we have a matching challenge so far of $155,000. Probably will go up a little bit more over the next week or so, but this is a way in which if you would want to make a gift, it will be doubled. $100 becomes $200, $200 becomes $400. If you want to join with us on a monthly basis, and I certainly have encouraged many of you to consider maybe being part of the Truth Team, because we send you not only our Outlook magazine, but also our booklets, and some of the ones coming out right now are certainly addressing very important issues that Christians need to know about. That is available for as little as $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. But as we go to a break, might click on that button that says Give Now, because every dollar is doubled. We'll be right back.
In 19th century London, two towering historical figures did battle, not with guns and bombs, but words and ideas. London was home to Karl Marx, the father of communism, and legendary Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon. London was in many ways the center of the world, economically, militarily, and intellectually. Marx sought to destroy religion, the family, and everything the Bible supports. Spurgeon stood against him, warning of socialism's dangers. Spurgeon understood Christianity is not just religious truth, it is truth for all of life. Where do you find men with that kind of wisdom to stand against darkness today? Get the light you need on today's most pressing issues delivered to your inbox when you sign up for the Viewpoints commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Every weekday, in less than 2 minutes, you'll learn how to be a person of light to stand against darkness in our time. It's free, so visit pointofview.net/signup right now. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we can get into a couple things. First of all, let me just mention my commentary today is on the issue of affordability and affluence. Reason I do that is I do believe this affordability issue is going to be significant. And after spending a significant amount of time, President Trump saying that it was nothing more than a Democratic hoax, I was watching a piece the other day where they were showing how when he was running against Joe Biden, he talked about the issue of affordability, but once he was president, it's all been hoax. I think he's finally had enough people say, Mr. President, you won the election based upon this issue of affordability and a variety of other issues. You better not now call it a hoax simply because we've seen some of the economy turn around. People are still struggling with some of those issues, and yes, you want to have this to be a golden age, but it isn't yet, and there are some reasons why you need to address that. And I think if you want to understand part of the reason for the speech last night, that is it. I point out in this piece that this comes from a writer that I thought was interesting, Kelsey Piper, that she wants to remind us that when we talk about affordability, there's the other side of that, which also needs to be kept in tension, and that is affluence. Yes, it is hard to make ends meet, but let's put this in perspective. If we look at how so many other people in other centuries lived. And she talks about, for example, that medieval kings would envy you. She says as she walks through her house, she sees 27 varieties of tea in a cupboard, and she talks about her bookshelf that was just brimming with books. And when the Library of Congress was founded, it had 740 books. I have more. She walks by glass windows, which were a luxury for just a few people since the time of Rome, but that's underselling modern windows because those weren't transparent back then. She talks about a refrigerator. She talks about flush toilets, talks about the fact they didn't even have a flush toilet in the White House until basically the middle part of the 19th century. And of course, Americans had it much less. The one that I thought was most poignant is what I talk about the children. If you compare her children that she has to the English royal line, King James I and his wife had 7 children and buried 5. His son Charles and his wife had 9 children, buried 5. His son James had 3 children by his first wife and buried 6. 7 children by his second wife, buried 5. And that, of course, doesn't even include several miscarriages and stillbirths. And she points out, basically, we're rich beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. So when we do talk about this issue of affordability, which is a significant issue and will be an election issue, it is important for us to remind ourselves that we are living in the lap of luxury compared to what most people had to deal with all through history until fairly recently. But with that as background, one of the big issues, not only in the 2026 election, but right now, even today, is the issue of health care. And so I have this particular article that appeared in USA Today. Ingrid Jacques points out the fact that we have about 24 million people who do purchase insurance through what are called the Obamacare exchanges. And they have benefited over these last few years from the boosted or enhanced subsidies that were put in place under the Biden administration. Now, these subsidies, these so-called enhanced subsidies, were supposed to be temporary because ultimately we are no longer dealing with a pandemic. And so as a result, they are set to expire in about 2 weeks, December 31st, actually just almost exactly 2 weeks from today. And at that point, the premiums for some individuals will double. Now, she doesn't point this out, but I have pointed it out in previous commentaries that when you talk about doubling, it doubles sometimes for the people who are most able to afford it. There are some pretty affluent people who are complaining about the fact that their premiums will double, but they're making a lot more in terms of net income than most Americans are, but we'll leave that for another day. So the question is, will Congress, before the December 31st deadline, actually approve those? As you heard me mention the other day, you had all the Democrats plus 4 Republicans sign a discharge petition, which will force a vote on the whole issue of enhanced subsidies. But many of the Republicans, and I would have to say a good number of Democrats, aren't convinced that certainly trying to double these subsidies is the real answer. That's merely trying to kick the can down the road, and we're starting to run out of road. So are there some solutions? And over the last couple of days, we've talked about some. Tomorrow with Dr. Merrill Matthews, we'll talk about a few more. But in this article, she points out that you have some Republicans from California and Democrats as well. So Kevin Kiley is a Republican. Sam Liccardo, I hope I'm pronouncing their names right, have put together what is a plan called the Fix-It Act, which would extend the Obamacare subsidies for 2 years while trying to save taxpayers about $9 billion over the next 10 years in terms of coming up with some of the various solutions. And these can be a variety of different things, a reasonable income cap, putting in some anti-fraud measures, because this is rife with fraud, as we've talked about before. Also incorporating another piece of legislation that will crack down on overpayments to insurance companies and much more. And so those are some ideas. We've talked about others which deserve a longer period of discussion, which could have been taking place instead of having the longest shutdown in American history, but that's in the rearview mirror now. So she points out, for example, that Republican and Democratic leaders have their own ideas. For example, Mike Johnson, who is Speaker of the House and also Republican from Louisiana, put forth a plan that could come for a vote this week, which would include this, as we've talked about before, allowing associations to actually bid for plans or create their own plan. The idea of sharing and even being able to purchase insurance across state lines, which is certainly important. One that's not in the Republican plan, but we'll talk about that tomorrow with Dr. Merrill Matthews, would be the significant expansion of medical savings accounts and also the use of allowing individuals to purchase pharmaceuticals directly from the companies, Trump RX as it's called. Donald Trump puts his name on almost everything, is the case. But as she points out here, Mike Johnson is saying that Obamacare is what broke the American healthcare system by contributing to rising premiums, and went on to say that if we are going to solve the problem, first of all, let's at least acknowledge that this particular Obamacare plan was put together by only the votes from Democrats, and any compromise is going to have to be bipartisan, because even if you can get a majority to pass something in the House, you still have this 60-vote majority that you need in the Senate to move legislation any further. And so that is certainly the case. One of the concerns, of course, is the fact that even people on the plans recognize something needs to take place. There was a poll that came out recently that showed that 54%, more than a majority, of Obamacare enrollees who are registered to vote say if their health care costs increase by even just $1,000 next year, it would have a major impact on their vote. And so they recognize that there is a problem with Obamacare. They recognize that if they don't get the enhanced subsidies, they might vote against members of Congress that did not vote for those. And in some respects, almost half, 52%, say it would have a major impact on which party's candidate to support. The argument right now from the Democrats is, well, this will be good for Democrats in the midterms. I'm not so sure. I think it would be bad for any member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, when they many of the voters say, you've been in office a long time, you didn't fix this, I'm not going to just assume that I'm only going to vote Republicans out of office. I'm going to vote Democrats out of office because you didn't deal with any of these issues, and this has made our life even more difficult. So as much as the Democrats thinking that this is something that's going to hurt Republicans, and I know that it will, I think it could also hurt many of the Democrats that are incumbents. Any incumbent is going to have to face the music of, why didn't you fix this problem by doing something other than just increasing the so-called enhanced subsidies? We have a desire, we really have a desire and a right to have a better healthcare system than the one we have right now. We'll take a break, though. We'll talk about more right after this.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we've got two articles that I wanted to point you to. One by John Stossel about government IDs and government control in the digital age. And then a second one by Senator Rand Paul about the Federal Reserve. And in some respects, these can be connected back to an interview that we did earlier in the week with Representative Keith Self. You might remember that he wanted to add the language and attempted to indeed add language to the Defense Authorization Bill, which would prevent the introduction of CBDCs. Now, what is that? That's a central bank digital currency. The central bank would be the Federal Reserve that would then issue all these digital IDs and digital currency, and a result, and that sounds really good until you dig in and realize this would allow the digital control of you. But don't take my word for it. John Stossel, in his piece, in which he even had one of his associates do some interviews, reminds us of the dangers of any kind of digital ID in this digital age. He starts out by saying the TSA announcement from Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem sternly warns you will need a real ID to travel by air or visit federal buildings. European politicians go much further, which they're talking with the producer, pushing government-mandated digital IDs that tie your identity to nearly everything that you do. And then if you watch the video, you can see all of this. Spain's prime minister promises this would end anonymity online. The British Prime Minister warns you will be able to work in the United Kingdom if you will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have a digital ID. Queen Maxima of the Netherlands enthusiastically told the World Economic Forum that digital IDs are good for knowing who actually got a vaccination or not. And then John Stossel even points out that some of the tech leaders are all excited about this. The second richest man in the world, Oracle founder Larry Ellison, said citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything. And John Stossel says, that's a good thing? I think what you're getting at very quickly here is something we've talked about on this program before. And one of their privacy specialists that they interviewed, Naomi Brockwell, said, this is a recipe for disaster and totalitarianism. Privacy is not about hiding. It's about an individual's right to decide for themselves who gets to access their data. And a digital ID will strip individuals of that choice. And so, again, the producer for the Stossel TV program says, well, I have a government-issued ID. Why is a digital one worse? And the privacy specialist says, well, it connects everything. Your financial decisions, your social media posts, things like that, things that are even what you're watching, places where you're going. You won't be able to voice things anonymously online anymore. Everything you say will be tied back to who you are. And thus, it gets to what, of course, the United Kingdom Prime Minister said, you can access your own money, make payments more easily, But then the privacy expert, Broyles, says, yes, unless those services start saying, no, you can't use our system. And even without a digital ID, we saw how Canada, as we talked about the other day with Keith Self, how Canada froze the bank accounts of truckers because they protested some of the COVID vaccine mandates. With a digital ID, it will become even more easily done. For example, the privacy expert Broyles says you're essentially putting a big target on every aspect of your life, wrapping it up in a nice bow and saying, here, if you want to control me, just untie this. And so you're already starting to see many states are passing age verification laws that require you to identify yourself and prove your age before accessing certain websites. Matter of fact, that's even done here in the state of Texas where we're broadcasting. And so as a result, what you're going to end up with is what they point out here, something which would have these great sounding bills like, let's stop all the bad people doing all the bad things bill. But what you're voting for, they point out, is for a system of control and oppression. You'll be ranked based on your past activities and choices that you've made in the past. China already does that. And so again, the privacy expert Broyles says it makes you super easy to target, easy to silence if suddenly you become problematic. Whoever controls that data has a lot of power. They're simply handing it to them. People need to be aware that they have no control over who will access this tool and who will control this tool in the future. So again, even in this particular interview, the producer of Stossel TV says, well, wait a minute, though. You know, you've got companies like, Facebook, Google, Chase Bank already have the data. Shouldn't I trust my government more? Well, the privacy expert says, well, governments, unlike companies, can throw you in jail. So it's sad that so many corporations, so many companies, so many businesses, so many tech companies have your information. It's quite another to have the government have access to that as well. And the privacy expert ends by saying, this is something that is skyrocketing towards that direction. The surveillance infrastructure we're trying to put in place in the United States is heading directly towards where China currently is. So what can we do about it? Well, people need to be reminded that they're empowered to affect that change, and they need to reach out to representatives. They need to push back. They need to protect themselves, not to build this infrastructure in the first place. Which brings me to my piece by Rand Paul. He's actually calling for better surveillance of the Federal Reserve. And, of course, we talk about that in, I think it was our November issue of Outlook, which you are free to get a copy of if you'd like. But he points out that the Federal Reserve is one of the most powerful, secretive, and unaccountable institutions in U.S. history. Its insulation from oversight combined with its massive coffers and strong statutory authorities make it a uniquely troubling institution. Now, this is from Rand Paul. Recognize that his father even wrote a book called End the Fed. But anyway, Rand Paul says this, to give you an idea of just how powerful the Federal Reserve is, in 2018, Forbes ranked Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, as the 11th most powerful person in the world, ahead of the prime ministers of France and the UK. By the way, I would say that in some respect, the Federal Reserve chairman is as powerful as the President of the United States. They can determine what the cost of money is. And so he says, earnest oversight is long overdue. Current law prohibits the Government Accountability Office from auditing the Fed's vast monetary policy functions, and the Fed's Inspector General serves at the pleasure of the Federal Board of Governors, a very institution that's supposed to hold accountable. So he's really calling for End the Fed's Big Bank Bailout Act, and that is a piece that I think just reminds you we don't want CBDCs. We don't want the central bank to have digital currency they issue to you. And I think the piece by John Stossel covered coupled, I should say, with Senator Rand Paul illustrates why we will be talking about this again in the future. But if nothing else, I hope you'll join us on Friday. We're going to be talking about some of these votes in Congress. We're going to be talking about the midterm elections. Merrill Matthews said, why do we have so many bankruptcies in an economy that's supposedly doing so well? We're going to get into a lot of very important issues, so I hope you can join us then. As always, I want to thank Megan for engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. Hope you'll join us tomorrow right here on Point of View and our weekend edition. We'll see you then.
Do not miss the fact that this is an exciting time in America. Record numbers of Gen Z returning to church, reading the Bible. God is clearly moving. But it's also a critical time. Without trustworthy biblical guidance, without spiritual mentors willing to disciple, those young people full of zeal today could be led astray tomorrow. And that's why I urge you to partner with Point of View and equip the mentors the next generation needs. When you support Point of View, you provide a wealth of resources to equip Americans to think biblically about every issue relevant to life today. Your support could supply the tools that someone needs to apply biblical truth in discipleship. So partner with us today, and your gift will be doubled through December 31st. So give today at pointofview.net, or you can call us 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.